They towed my tenant's truck at 10 in the morning, broad daylight, like they owned the place, and by noon she was in tears. And by 3 I realized this wasn't a mistake, it was a power move, and by the end of that week I knew one of us was going to learn a very expensive lesson. I own a small commercial building in downtown Asheville. Nothing flashy, just red brick and a creaky stair that smells faintly of coffee and old wood. But the thing that actually makes the place hum is the parking lot out back. 12 spaces, clean lines, metal signs bolted into concrete that say tenant parking only. Violators will be towed. Downtown parking here is a blood sport, so those 12 spots are basically equity you can drive into. For 8 years, nobody crossed the lines, not once. Accountants, a therapist, a graphic designer, an immigration attorney, people who show up and pay rent on time, they respected the lines because they were obvious. Then the building next door sold. Old insurance office, beige and forgettable. A couple from Seattle bought it, Ethan and Marissa, early 40s, startup money, big ideas and bigger renovations. Within days, there were dumpsters and contractors and the smell of sawdust everywhere. They were turning it into a co-working thing, exposed brick glass, the whole aesthetic. I met Ethan while I was up on a ladder cursing a gutter. Big handshake, bright smile, that practiced CEO smile. "Hey neighbor," he said, like we'd been pals for years. I showed him the property line and pointed at my 12 spaces. "These are mine," I told him. "They're deeded to my parcel. My tenants depend on them." He squinted at the asphalt like he was reading a map. "Got it," he said. "We'll stay in our lane." That should have been the end of it. I wanted to believe him. Maybe that was my first mistake. 3 weeks later, my phone rang at 4:30. Carla, the therapist on the second floor, sounded like she was about to tear a hole in the building with her voice. Calm by profession, steady voice, no drama. But that day, she was furious. "They took my truck," she said. "I parked in my spot this morning and now there's a sticker and my truck is gone." The sticker said someone had towed it and there was a fee to get it back. $425. I felt something tighten in my chest, not panic, just this brittle irritation. I called the number on the sticker, Summit Recovery. A guy answered right away. He told me they'd been authorized by the property owner next door. "Our records show those spaces belong to Caldwell Innovation," he said. I told him I owned the building slowly, like I was explaining basic geometry. Pause. Paper shuffling. "Mr. Caldwell showed us documentation," he said. "Survey, parcel, map, the whole thing." I put Ethan on the phone 5 minutes later. "Hey buddy," he said like it was a joke. "You had my tenant's truck towed." A soft laugh. "We needed overflow parking for contractors." "Your signs look old." Marissa thought those spots were part of our lot. I said, "They're deeded to my parcel." He shifted tone just enough to notice. "Our survey shows the boundary cuts through that strip," he said. "It's not as clear as you think. Let the attorneys figure it out. In the meantime, your tenant can pick up her truck." That was the moment I stopped pretending this was confusion. That laugh, that shrug, it was strategy. Contractors were clogging the block. Street parking was scarce, and my 12 empty spaces during business hours looked like a buffet. To Ethan, I wasn't a neighbor. I was an obstacle. I paid the $425 that evening because Carla had clients the next day and I wasn't about to let her reputation take a hit for someone else's ego. But as I drove home, I kept hearing that laugh in my head. "Your signs look old." It wasn't the signs. It was territory. I pulled the original deed from my files the next morning and called Daniel Harper, my attorney. 60-ish gray hair, slow drawl, has handled property disputes longer than Ethan's probably been alive. Daniel read everything and said flatly, "He's wrong. Those spaces are within your boundary. No ambiguity." "So the tow was illegal," I said. "Absolutely. That's conversion and trespass." He sent a cease and desist and demanded reimbursement. Ethan's lawyer replied within 48 hours with a slick letterhead and a polite tone suggesting we split the towing cost as a gesture of good faith while the survey issue got clarified. Split the cost of my own parking lot. I stared at that line longer than I should have. It wasn't about money anymore, it was precedent. Give an inch, you invite negotiation over what's yours. Daniel filed suit and things escalated. Over the next month, more vehicles disappeared from my lot. Each time a tow truck rolled in within hours, surgical precise. My tenants started calling before leaving work just to make sure their cars would still be there. The office mood changed. People whispered in the hallway. One asked me quietly if he should start hunting for new space. I covered every towing fee, over $1,600 in total, not because I had to, but because loyalty matters. I wasn't going to let Ethan turn my tenants into collateral damage. I called Ethan after the fourth tow. "This stops now," I said. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. "Then win in court," he replied. "Until then, we operate under our survey." That line lit something in me that wasn't anger exactly, it was clarity. If he wanted to play leverage, I needed a better piece on the board. I didn't storm his renovation or flip a reclaimed wood table. I drove out to the edge of town where Summit Recovery kept its trucks, a gravel lot behind a chain-link fence, 2 beat-up tow rigs, a small office that looked like it had survived multiple decades without committing to any of them. A faded neon sign in the window, a dog sleeping in the shade. A man in a ball cap and grease on his forearms came out to meet me. Travis Monroe. He'd bought the company from his uncle 5 years earlier. 2 trucks, 3 drivers, a handful of contracts with apartment complexes and private lots. Not a gold mine, just survival. We sat in his office, smell of old coffee invoices on a whiteboard in red marker. "We only tow when authorized," he said. "If a property owner calls, we respond." "I know," I replied. "That's why I'm here." He admitted the truth, he didn't have the manpower to verify title searches on the fly. "Fuel's up, insurance is killing us," he said. "We take contracts where we can." His voice had the tiredness of someone balancing invoices on a wing and a prayer. Fuel insurance bills, that was the arithmetic of his day. I listened. No threats, no accusations. I listened to a guy keeping his business alive. And a thought kept running in circles. Ethan's leverage exists only while Summit answers his calls. Remove that, and the whole strategy collapses. 2 days later, I called Travis and asked a blunt question: "What would it take for you to sell silence, then disbelief?" "You serious?" "Dead serious." He named a number lower than I expected. We met in the lot, shook hands, and I bought Summit Recovery. Not to spite him, not to gloat, to remove the lever. I pulled money from a line of credit I'd been avoiding, signed the papers, assumed insurance, kept Travis and his drivers on payroll at a slightly better rate. I didn't post about it. I didn't announce it to the block. First thing I did was audit every tow from my property right checks and hand them to tenants who'd paid fees one by one. Carla looked at hers and said, "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did," I told her. "You pay rent for peace of mind. That includes your parking spot." Then I reviewed Summit's contracts. Ethan's was month-to-month termination clause, simple and clean. I drafted a letter, Daniel reviewed it, and sent formal notice effective immediately. Summit Recovery would no longer honor towing requests from Caldwell Innovation for Ash Street due to verified boundary clarification. Certified mail. Then I replaced my signage, same language, same posts, but the number printed beneath it now routed to my office. 3 days later, a contractor van idled into my lot like it had somewhere to be. I watched from the second-floor window, waited 10 minutes, and my phone rang. "Summit Recovery," Ethan said, voice tight. "We need a tow at Caldwell Innovation." "Who's calling?" I asked. "Ethan Caldwell. This is Thomas Reed." I said my name. "You're speaking to the owner of Summit Recovery." Silence so loud I could hear the street. "You bought the towing company," he blurted. "Yes." The line went quiet. "We reviewed the records," I said evenly. "Those 12 spaces are not within your boundary. We will not tow vehicles from property that doesn't belong to you." He hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. I'd removed the unfair advantage. That afternoon, Ethan and Marissa marched in heels, clicking indignation ready. "This is harassment," Marissa said. "You're weaponizing a service provider to retaliate." I folded my hands on my desk. "I purchased a local business that was struggling," I said. "I corrected improper tows. I terminated a month-to-month contract. Which part is harassment?" Ethan flushed. He wasn't used to not getting his way. "We'll see what the judge says," he snapped. We did see what the judge said. 2 months later, in a fluorescent courtroom with a woman judge who had zero patience for theatrics, Daniel laid out the deed, the county plat, the photographs, the receipts for every tow. Ethan's side leaned on reasonable confusion and implied I'd acted in bad faith by acquiring Summit. Bad faith hung in the air like smoke. The judge asked one question that mattered: did you verify the county plat before authorizing the initial tow? Ethan hesitated and then admitted, "No." "Belief is not entitlement," she said, and ruled the 12 spaces were unequivocally mine. The initial tow was unauthorized and the subsequent tows, after written notice, were willful interference. Reimbursement court costs, attorney fees a little over $14,000. Ethan stared forward like he was processing how something so small grew so large. Outside the courtroom, the narrative spread. Some called my move brilliant, others said it was cold. A cafe owner pulled me aside and said, "Buying the towing company, that's ruthless." Maybe. I've had nights lying awake asking if I'd gone too far. I've always tried to be a good neighbor. I wanted to believe Ethan when he smiled. There's a line between kindness and passivity. If I'd split the towing fees or quietly accepted temporary confusion, what message would I have sent to my tenants or to myself about ownership being negotiable if someone pushed hard enough? Here's the part people miss buying. Summit wasn't revenge. It was insulation. It closed a vulnerability I didn't know I had. It stopped a tactic that turned people's livelihoods into bargaining chips. 6 months later, Ethan asked to meet. He looked tired, less polished. "I thought you'd cave," he said quietly. "Most small owners do," he admitted. "It's easier than fighting." We didn't become friends. This isn't a feel-good movie, but things shifted. Once, when a delivery truck blocked my loading zone, Ethan sent someone over to help redirect traffic without me asking. Small, almost invisible acknowledgement. Sometimes consequences teach what conversations can't. So what's the lesson? I'll tell you mine: be kind when you can be decisive when you must. Protect the people who rely on you and don't let posture be mistaken for weakness. There's a thin line between strategic and spiteful. Everyone draws it in a different place. I know how I justify what I did. I protected my tenants, defended my property, and acted within the law. But was it too much? Maybe to some. Maybe to me at 3 a.m. sometimes it felt heavy. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Fought strictly in court and absorbed the stress, or taken control of the lever being used against you? Drop your thoughts. Was this justice or overkill? And if you've ever had a neighbor mistake kindness for weakness, tell me that story too. Because sometimes the real lesson isn't about parking spaces or tow trucks, it's about knowing when to stay patient and when to make your move.